Okay, so we're just about to walk into the gym. Now, what's really important is when you walk into a gym environment, do not rely on your supplementation to fuel your workout. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that supplements are not to be used based around potentially as a pre-workout, an intra or post supplementation, because I feel that they are. But you should already be primed. All your essential macronutrients should be in place. So you should have adequate glycogen storage in your liver and also your mitochondria. You should be well hydrated. Your nitrogen retention and protein synthesis levels should be optimal before you walk into that gym environment. Remember, when you start putting stress and load on your body, so whether you're doing an anaerobic or aerobic form of exercise, you're going to start potentially taking a deficit away from those essentials. So of course, supplementation can be an essential element to aid with your workout, replenish and recover. So with me, I'm already hydrated. I've already been taking hydration supplementation, my Hydro Elite, making sure my fluid's high, making sure my essential high mineral sodium through the form of raw or pink Himalayan salt has been high through my meals yesterday and also this morning. I've already had 2 meals in me. Not that really makes any difference. And what I mean by that, some people will train with 1 meal. Some people will train with 2 or 3 meals or even 4 meals before they walk into that gym environment. Remember, those meals that you consume today aren't necessarily aiding or maximizing your responses in the gym. It could be a percentage of the meals that you ate yesterday. So I think there's a big misconception out there where people feel like in order to get the best responses or the highest level of stimulus and being strong in that gym environment, you've got to eat 3 or 4 meals. No, because if I was averaging 6 meals a day, for example, and I was training after meal 1, that post-training meal, that's not even including my post-workout supplementation, but that post-workout meal, which is meal 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, so that's 5 meals that I'm consuming after my training, and as I said already, I would have had my post-workout supplementation. Those are not just aiding with the recovery process of that workout, which potentially would create a deficit or muscle breakdown depending on your chosen sport, but they're also replenishing and fueling you for the following day. All right, so I'm already fueled, my glycogen levels are high, I'm very hydrated, I'm going to walk into the gym, I'm going to take my supplementation, and today it's going to be a week 2 Y3T workout, okay? However, there's different microcycles of Y3T, week 1, week 2, week 3. We'll be doing a big introduction and also explanation on Y3T on the Yamamoto Nutrition YouTube page and also on yamamotonutrition.com, so make sure you check it out. So you guys and girls obviously live in different destinations around the world and have the opportunity of being here in Las Vegas, the Dragon's Lair, home to 7x 212 Mr. Olympia Flex Lewis, and giving you the ability to be a fly on the wall and watching and capturing this information and these videos for you guys and girls, obviously in different destinations, towns, cities around the world, is very, very rewarding for me. Now today, I want to talk a little bit about pre-workout supplementation before we walk onto that gym environment floor. Very, very important. Depending on your chosen discipline, dependent on your exercise selection and your execution and exactly what you're going to be doing in your own fitness program and exercise selection is potentially also going to have to be considered when you take your supplementation, okay? So I'm already primed as far as my glycogen storage, but what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to put a little bit of extra carbs in just before I start training, more as a shuttle really to help and shuttle and aid my pre-workout supplementation. So I'm going to be taking this product within the Yamamoto product line. This is going to be my pre-workout. So I've got my branched chains in here. I've got my fermented branched chains. I've got 4 grams of L-citrulline. I've also obviously got in here my caffeine. So it's slightly going to be a slight stim. This is going to help with adaptation of maximizing or aiding or replenishing ATP. Not just obviously within this product as well, but with the other products I'm going to be taking with this. Now, depending on what microcycle I'm going to be doing in the gym is also going to dictate what supplements I'm going to take, okay? Now, one thing I will be doing, in some areas I'm going to be doubling up on supplementation. So some of the supplements I'm going to be taking within the Yamamoto product line are also going to be in other products as well. I'll explain a little bit about that later on. For me, I would rather take a little bit more of certain essential supplements than less. Now, when you walk into that gym and you start going through your performances and your exercises and you're really pushing and challenging, you're going to start to create a deficit of some kind. All right, so you're going to get a crossover potentially of muscle fiber activation. You're going to get a crossover of energy systems. You're going to get large motor unit recruitment coming into play, huge stress and load on your central nervous system in a positive way, maximizing muscle fiber activation. And that's something which is really important if you're looking to build and create an environment for progressive overload. We'll be talking about progressive overload also in this video, so you guys and girls will be able to understand that there's different variables of progressive overload which need to be considered. But as far as my supplementation, let's get on with it. So I'm going to take 1 scoop of my pre-workout. I'm not relying on this pre-workout, right, to maximize my performances as far as my intensity. That really comes from my mental clarity. Yes, certain supplementations are going to aid with allowing you to give you more mental clarity and focus. But I'm already focused before I walk in here. I know exactly what I want to achieve from this workout. Supplementation is just a supplement to help and aid as opposed to deliver that response. That delivery response comes within my mindset purely. So I'm going to be taking roughly about 15 grams of carbohydrates through the form of glycocharge. This is my preferred carbohydrate source, highly branched cytodextrin. You're not going to have any digestive issues. You're not going to have any gastric emptying issues while you're training when taking this. You can take this as a pre, an intra, and a post-workout supplement. And also in here, we've also got our fermented essentials. I'm also going to take a little bit of extra L-glutamine. So I'm going to be taking some fermented L-glutamine as well. Some people will say glutamine in some ways is counterproductive and not necessarily needed. I am somebody who would kind of argue that, especially as you go through the environments of muscle breakdown, which will take place if you are in an environment of progressive overload, which you should be if you are looking to maximize and progress with your gym floor environments, or variable, should I say. And then lastly, I'm also going to be taking some Hydro Elite. So I'm going to be maximizing again with my hydration. And what I'm going to do also, probably halfway through my workout, I'm also going to be taking more hydration product. I'm also going to be taking more fermented essential amino acids through the form of AminoDex. That's an incredible product in itself. So all our products within the fermented line come from the highest bioavailable, active, fermented, plant-based essentials in the marketplace. So that's pretty much my pre-workout here, okay? I haven't put any fast digesting protein yet. I may consume a little bit of hydrolyzed whey isolate or hydrolyzed casein halfway through the workout. It depends on whether I feel I need it, okay? So I'm going to take this, going to wait about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to start training. Now, what I do with my supplements as far as my pre-workout, I normally drink this about 10 to 15 minutes before I train. Now in here, this container is roughly about 750 to 800 mil. I've already consumed 2 liters of water before I've come to the gym today. I'm probably going to drink about 3/4 to 80% of this. So I'm going to be drinking about maybe 600 mil of this. And then I'm actually going to fill it right up to the top again with water. I'm going to start drinking that last amount through the first half of my workout. Then I'm going to start replenishing again. As I said, I might take in some more highly branched cytodextrin through the form of my glycocharge. This is an incredible product, right? So it not only has highly branched cytodextrin in there, which, as I said, is going to help and aid with your glycogen storage, optimizing ATP. It's also got in here our fermented essentials in here. I'm also going to be taking more of my Hydro Elite, and I'm probably going to put a little bit of extra CreaPure creatine to help and aid with the adaptation of ATP. But it depends on what kind of deficit I create. If my expenditure is really high with my performances and I'm over delivering and creating a very high stimulus and nucleus for progressive overload, I'm potentially going to need those essential supplements that I'm putting back in, okay? Now, when I say that they're essential in my mind. Obviously, essential amino acids are critical to help and support and fighting against catabolism, which will take place if you're training really hard in the gym, which you should be. So the philosophy behind Y3T is allowing you to train in a methodical, three-dimensional approach. And what I mean by methodical, it's structured, it's put in place. You know exactly what you are doing or what you are looking to achieve in each week of training. So Y3T is going to allow you to break down specifics within muscle fiber activation. So whether you are targeting myofibria hypertrophy, type 2B muscle fiber activation, whether you are targeting a blend or a hybrid crossover of myofibria and sarcoplasmic through the form of type 2A muscle fiber activation, or whether you are targeting slow twitch muscle fibers, which are primarily going to be focused on sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So each and specific week is going to be targeting certain areas, and your exercise selection and your rep ranges are also going to be in line with that given week that you are training within that timeline. So Y3T differs because it allows you to have specific weeks to focus on. Okay, allows you to target that given rep range, that given exercise selection, and also that environment for muscle fiber activation, and also the type of energy system that you're going to be targeting within that given week. So you have specifics. Now, a lot of workouts out there or training programs have specifics, but they tend to be very one-dimensional on their approach. With Y3T, you have a specific week that you focus on. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get a crossover. It doesn't mean that you won't start scavenging different muscle fiber activation, different type of energy systems, because there's going to be a time where you will find that you create an environment which is a positive environment to scavenge onto different muscle fiber activation or different energy systems, and it comes into play innocently with progressive overload. So Y3T on paper is structured on a three-dimensional training protocol based on different microcycles. Week one is going to be focusing on type 2B muscle fiber activation, large motor unit recruitment, rep range anywhere between 6 and 12 repetitions, and focusing on, as I said, compound movements. That isn't a week one workout. On a week two workout, it's more like a hybrid. You will be focusing on a selection of compound movements as well as isolation movements, and you will be focusing on a rep range of anywhere between 14 and 18 repetitions, and you will get a crossover of myofibria and sarcoplasmic as your body starts to scavenge. When we move on to a week 3 workout, then you're going to be focusing on potentially high working sets, drop sets, supersets, triple drop sets. Now, when I say potentially, depending on the exercise selection is going to depend on whether you potentially will just be doing straight working high reps in that set, or whether you're going to incorporate potentially a drop set, whether you're going to potentially incorporate a triple drop or a superset, or even a giant set. But you have to understand the principles, and you also have to understand the importance of exercise selection within that given week or any of the weeks, and the rep rates are high. Energy expenditure within that week is going to be bringing in a different form of energy production. Okay, so it's going to bring a different energy system into play, like all the other weeks, and the repetitions tend to be a minimum of 20 reps and above, focusing on sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. I will quite often bring up to my clients and athletes that it's really important that we focus on being anaerobically strong, anaerobically fit, and also being aerobically strong and aerobically fit, because both of these variables from being aerobic and anaerobic have very, very active interaction with progression, on building muscle tissue, aiding with recovery. You'll have some people which will be very physically strong on an anaerobic side, but very weak and vulnerable on an aerobic side. So when you are able to create the variables within Y3T, which are conducive with incorporating both of those, it creates a very strong environment, not just for building muscle tissue, but it can also aid with progressive overload. Because what you will find as you go through these training stimulus, there's going to be a demand of aerobic fitness and anaerobic fitness, as well as aerobic fitness and aerobic strength. So you will innocently be creating an environment to bring multiple forms of these variables into play, which will help and aid with your recovery and the ability of pushing hard on your reps, incorporate in a very positive form of progressive overload. So in terms of how often you should change your training stimulus within Y3T, it depends on the progression. If you are making great progression changes, then there's no real need for you to make changes until they're absolutely necessary. What I will say is you have to look at your training stimulus like your diet. You should not be changing your diet every day. You should not be changing your diet every week and changing all the variables, because you're never going to have any data to know what works for you. What I would say to the majority of people which follow Y3T, give it at least 12 weeks. So follow the training protocol, depending on how you've microcycled or how it has been microcycled, because obviously we're going to be giving you some free content in here to choose from. So you're going to be able to choose the exercise chart and the microcycle chart to suit your needs and requirements. But I would say in general, a minimum of 12 weeks. If you are following the Y3T microcycle in a certain methodical process and you're seeing positive changes progressing on a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly time frame, then I would stay in place with that, all right? But in most cases, 12 weeks. However, when I do then change a client's training protocol and I create a new Y3T training program, I will then choose different exercise selection. You will always see quite often in a week 1 workout some of the same exercises in week 2 and week 3, but it's how you choose them and select them within a methodical order. So nothing is just chosen and put into place for no reason. Everything is thought out. Your exercise selection is really important and critical in order to be able to see the greatest responses. So as far as how often you would change it, it depends on how much progression you're seeing within your training. But also understand that maybe your training program does not need to be changed. It's your other lifestyle habits which need to be changed. Are you primarily focusing on your nutritional requirements? So are you putting that time and that attention into the variables and the essentials of all your nutritional needs? That's not just your macronutrients. It also comes into sleep, hydration, stress levels. What are your positive hormonal responses taking place? So there's many variables that you've got to consider. It's not just one aspect of what you should be looking at. You need to look at all the different variables which have to be considered with creating the environment which is going to allow you to progress. So I'm going to take some intra-workout supplementation. So I've already taken some of these products already in my pre-workout. Sorry, just getting my breath here. So I'm also going to be doubling up on my branch chains, because obviously in here, leucine, isoleucine, and valine is obviously going to be in my AminoDex, but there's also going to be 4 grams of L-citrulline in here as well. So that's just going to aid with inducing a higher sense of blood flow and forcing these supplements into play. And I'm going to be taking roughly about 20 grams of carbs through the form of highly branched cytodextrin, but also in this product, there's also, again, fermented essentials. Now that's a lot of essential amino acids, you may say. In total, I'm taking about 15 grams of essential amino acids halfway through my workout, and about 20 grams of extra carbs through the form of highly branched cytodextrin. Now, depending on your expenditure in the gym, will depend on whether you need to microdose or take extra supplementations. If your output and expenditure is really low because I've been really pushing really hard on coming to that progressive overload and beyond, especially with incorporating rest pause. My exercise selection is also dictating as long as I apply myself to that environment as well. So I'm going to be taking now these essentials throughout my workout, and then after training I'm going to be taking my supplementation. It's going to come through the form of my Infusion Elite, so 4 different blends of protein, hydrolyzed casein, hydrolyzed whey isolate, and GMO-free egg white protein. It's also induced and supported with digestive enzymes, which are going to maximize digestion. I'm also going to be taking about 5 to 7 grams of Creapure creatine within our product line within Yamamoto Nutrition. And I'm also going to take probably another 20 to 30 grams of fast-acting carbs through the form of highly branched cytodextrin. And then here as well, obviously with this product, we obviously have highly branched cytodextrin, but we've got all our fermented essentials as well. So I'm going to be doubling up. So that's going to be my post-training. And remember, the amounts that you're taking as far as the grams of each item is also going to be dictated by your expenditure. Obviously, and body weight, depending on somebody's lean muscle mass, will depend on how much protein they consume. If you have somebody who's weighing in at a lean 140 pounds, then they don't necessarily need 40 grams of fast digesting proteins through the form of whatever form that is. So you need to make sure that you're considering those things as well, okay? Anyway, let's get on with this workout and finish it off, and let's finish strong because we started strong. So Y3T is a training approach for everybody. It doesn't matter if you are a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced. Whether you are any of those, the most critical and the most important elements that you need to consider is making sure that your exercise selection is in line with the movement. It means that you are in control of the weight. You do not let the weight control you. Your movement patterns are conducive with maximizing a response within the human body, making sure that your patterns are in line to prevent and reduce injury. So injury prevention is essential in the order of making sure that you're applying yourself within your exercises. There will be people who are really advanced with their training, which will use really poor form. So it's not necessarily whether Y3T is associated or it's able to be applied by a beginner or an advanced athlete. It's how you apply your exercises. That's what's really critical and important. And also, your intensity of your efforts in the gym are going to dictate so much within the environments that you're creating in the gym at that given time. Okay, so I want to talk about some essentials which have a crossover with Y3T. It's really important that you prioritize nutrition, not just before, potentially in your pre-workout supplementation, or potentially as an intra or post-workout, but you're already in a prime state on a nutritional point of view and well hydrated. These elements are essential in order for you to progress with your fitness goals and aid with the recovery process. Of course, you can aid and you can support that with supplementation, but just make sure you're prioritizing your macronutrients and your hydration first. Once you're in that gym environment and you are starting to warm up, make sure that you are priming your central nervous system efficiently. That means that you are warming up correctly. Your movement patterns line, your body is sensing stress and load, you're making micro adjustments, increases with the weight, so you're getting your central nervous system adapted to load and stress, so that when you go into your working sets, injury prevention is going to be decreased hugely. When you perform your exercise, make sure it's in line, full range of motion. Make sure you are always in control of the weight. Don't let the weight control you. Don't play up for the cameras. Social media, cameras, etc. can be a great tool for you to expand your reach, but they can be a really bad tool for you to try to impress people through a lens instead of being focused on what you're doing. You need to make sure you're aware of that. Cameras should not even really be on a gym floor. You might say, well, you're filming now in this video. Yes, we are. We're giving you this content and this information. But remember, The only person that you need to impress in your workouts is you. Not the viewer, not the likes, not the comments, you. Look at progressive overload as the number one priority, but making sure, as I've already spoken about, your movement patterns are in line. Look to extract everything from this workout. Push hard. Make sure you use a logbook. A logbook is going to allow you to be accountable. So write down the weight that you're using, the repetition, the exercise selection, irrespective what type of training program you're following. I feel a logbook creates a higher sense of accountability, which allows you then to push and challenge further within your workout. As you go through different phases of training, whether you're microcycling Y3T or others, you need to be aware that there are times where you need to step out of that gym environment and take rest. Rest is essential. So even though you may have a training program for you to follow, there are going to be days where your body will need more rest. Your adrenal system, your central nervous system is going to be stressed and loaded. You may find that your immunity has been compromised. So make sure that you are taking adequate rest days. Remember, you grow and recover out of the gym, not inside that gym environment. And also, lastly, I want to touch base on the amount of work in sets. The amount of work in sets doesn't necessarily mean it's more progression, it's more change, it's more conducive with reaching the end goal. How you apply and how you extend yourself in your working sets have to be considered on the total amount of volume you are doing. So when we talk about volume, indirectly, there's two variables of volume. There's the amount of repetitions and there's the amount of working sets. I would rather perform in an environment where I'm doing minimal sets for maximum output so I can step away and allow my body to recover and grow. All right, so there's some essentials that you need to make sure you're adhering to. And then when it comes to the ability to look at an individual and relate to, I do feel that's important. I do feel that we as people work really well when we're able to associate ourselves with certain individuals. So when we see an individual that we can relate to, that allows us to feel like there's more hope, there's more ability to progress, there's more reason for us to be able to reach a chosen goal. So surround yourself with individuals which lift you and inspire you as opposed to suppress you. So within Y3T, I'm a big advocate of rest pause. Rest pause allows you to extend yourself and get those extra repetitions and force another element of progressive overload. So progressive overload is a word that I feel is misused. Progressive overload to me is when I am creating a variable or an environment to progress. So by incorporating rest pause, you're able to indirectly, for a split second or a number of seconds, replenish ATP to get those last repetitions. How somebody implements rest pause may be different from one person to another. So how I apply rest pause can be incredibly different to other people. What I look to try to do where possible, and the exercise selection is going to dictate this, I try to make sure that when I'm rest pausing, I'm more or less nearly at about 95% of that failure rate or that failure position when I rest pause. I want to make sure my central nervous system is still engaged, but I am indirectly deloading to a certain extent the degree of stress and load on the muscle so I can replenish those ATP production to get those extra repetitions. It's not just about adding weight. It could be doing the same weight for the same repetitions. It could be the fact that you actually use the same weight with the same repetitions, but you're manipulating the eccentric. Time under tension has been upregulated. So you are creating another variable of progressive overload. However, you also need to consider that you are going to need enough time to replenish adequately ATP, okay? The energy system, which is going to be coming into play when you're training. All these different variables, even though they may seem simple on paper, when I talk to you, they can be very responsive in aiding on the progress with you pushing forward within that gym environment and obviously ultimately pushing in within that progressive overload environment. So in summary, I want to touch base, and we're also going to put some charts in there for you to understand a little bit more about what we've spoken about. So obviously with Y3T, it's a 3-dimensional training program where you're going to be training and specializing in and focus on specific muscle fiber activation. Okay, in week 1, you're going to be primarily focusing on large motor unit recruitment. The amount of volume as far as reps are concerned is going to be low, anywhere between 6 and 12 repetitions. You're going to be bringing in myofibria hypertrophy, type 2B muscle fiber activation. On a week 2 workout, you're going to have a crossover of type 2A and type 2B muscle fiber activation. So I call this a hybrid week, because you're also going to be incorporating as a scavenger indirectly myofibria and also sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And then as we move into week 3, it's going to be high training as far as repetitions. That doesn't necessarily mean that volume is specifically associated with the total amount of work in sets. It's more so associated with the amount of repetitions in a working set. So week 1, we're going to be focusing on compound movements, anywhere between 6 and 12 repetitions. Week 2 microcycle, you're going to be focusing on anywhere between 12 and 18 repetitions as far as your working reps in your sets. Quite often you'll see me listing anywhere between 14 and 18 repetitions with a week 2. And then when we go into the last week of the microcycle, week 3, the repetitions tend to be over 20 repetitions. They tend to be associated with either high working sets as far as reps, or drop sets, potentially triple drop sets, maybe giant sets, or even there could be supersets in there as well. Week 1, compound movements. Week 2, going to be focused on compound and isolation. And week 3, you're also going to potentially be focusing on compound and isolation movements. Okay, so when it comes to Y3T or any type of trainer style, especially when you're incorporating rest pause, you're really pushing and challenging yourself, then obviously repetitions are going to be associated with the type of energy system which is going to be responsible for fueling your workout. Now, I'm a massive advocate of rest pause. So when you rest pause and you put it into play efficiently or the right time, this will also influence on energy production and expenditure, okay? What you want to make sure is you're choosing your supplementation as far as your pre-workout supplements, and also maybe manipulating your intra-workout to help and aid with this expenditure of what type of energy system you're going to be fueling on. Now, you will get a crossover at some point, especially with a week 2 where the rep range are associated with anywhere between 12 to 18 reps. Sometimes it will say 14 to 18 repetitions. You'll scavenge, so you'll get a crossover of energy output or energy production with what's fueling. So make sure you're manipulating your supplementation wisely. Within the Yamamoto product line, we've got an incredible array of different supplements to choose from, which you can then microdose and manipulate within your supplement choices on that given day. So I'm going to touch base on a number of really important points that you have to consider. I'm probably just going to list anywhere between 5, 6, or 7 points. However, there are probably more than that amount of points. First of all, with any training program that you're following, it's really important that if you are going to be looking to extract that data and find out what works for you, and what I mean by that, so whether it's exercises which really work really well for you, for seeing an uptake in the ability to build muscle tissue and strength, then those exercise choices have to be associated and chosen and also thought through really wisely. Make sure you're using a logbook, okay? So you use a logbook to choose, as far as data is concerned, with writing the weight and the repetitions that you are performing, okay? It's really important that everything stays consistent. So the eccentric phase, depending on how you're going to manipulate that eccentric phase, has to be consistent, because if you're changing that variable, then that data is going to change. The repetitions could go up or they could come down. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing, but it means that you're not able to see exactly where the positives come from and where the negatives come from. Also, your rest sets or your resting period between working sets. If you're extending your resting period, then that is potentially going to have an influence on showing you indirectly false data. It could be showing that you're actually stronger, or if you're actually reducing that rest period, it could potentially show that you're actually losing strength. Now, talking about losing strength, if you're really pushing and challenging yourself within your working sets and reps, you are potentially going to start to lose repetitions because you are obviously creating deficit. You are obviously putting stress and load and creating an environment where you're breaking down muscle tissue. So that's going to have an influence. So there's many variables which have to be considered, okay? Make sure your mindset is strong in every single set. Mentally and physically, you're primed. When you walk into that set, you make sure you're a machine, okay? You program your mind, you're methodical, your movement patterns are in line, making sure that you're extracting that load and applying it onto the muscle and indirectly taking secondary muscle groups out of play. Certain secondary muscle groups will be a part of indirectly creating stabilization, but you need to make sure that you're looking to put that load on that connective tissue within that muscle group that you're training on that given day. It's really important. There are going to be a number of different factors, and I'm just going to name a few here, which are going to have an influence on you progressing with building muscle tissue and also with building strength. Okay, mechanical tension, stress and load on that muscle, metabolic stress, myofibria, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. These are all going to come into play at some point to create that change. So make sure that when you are applying yourself to your working sets, you're making sure that you're adhering to the principles and the protocols within Y3T so you can get the very most out of this training program. As far as the setup of Y3T and the microcycling, there's many different ways that you can actually microcycle. Now, I'm just going to name 3 as an example. Week 1 workout. The following week, you repeat week 1 workout. The following week, you repeat week 1 workout again. So you're focusing on those consecutive 3 weeks. You're focusing on fast twitch muscle fiber, type 2B, muscle fiber activation, rep range anywhere between 6 and 12 repetitions, primarily compound movements. Then on the 4th week, you will go into a week 2 workout. It's a crossover. Myofibria, sarcoplasmic, rep range anywhere between 12 and 18 repetitions. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. Quite often you will see anywhere between 14 and 18 repetitions listed. Compound and isolation movements. And then on the 5th week, it's high repetition training. You're going to be focusing on sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, high repetition reps. Working sets will be associated with isolation and compound movements. It could be supersets, it could be drop sets, it could be triple drop sets, or it could be high working reps. So that is a 5-week rotation program. Week 1, week 1, week 1, week 2, week 3, and then you would repeat it again, and then you repeat it again. So it becomes a 15-week training program for you to follow. Another example is going to be where you would potentially do week 1 workout, then you would do the week 2 workout, then you would repeat the week 2 workout, and then you would go on to the 4th week, which is your 3rd microcycle, high rep training with high repetitions. So what you've just done, you've created a 4-week training program associated with the different microcycles. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 3. Then you repeat, and then you repeat again. And that becomes a 12-week training program. And then another example could potentially be week 1 workout, week 2 workout, week 3 workout, week 3 workout. So that is a 4-week microcycle, and then you repeat it again, and then you repeat it again, so it becomes a 12-week training protocol. And again, these are just 1 or multiple or 3 different layers of Y3T that you can manipulate. There are many different variables and many different ways that you can incorporate the microcycling. It comes down to what works for you. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to list a full Y3T protocol or training program for you to follow. However, I'm going to allow you to use your own initiative as far as how you design your training split. So whether you potentially want to do back and biceps together one day, chest and triceps another day, shoulders and calves another day, and thighs and hamstrings together. So that is indirectly a 4-week workout, okay? So back and biceps, chest and triceps, shoulders and calves, and thighs and hamstrings. However, you may want to change that. You may want to train biceps and triceps together. That's okay. The week 1, the week 2, and the week 3 workout is in there, okay? So how you decide to design your training split, that is up to you. Make sure you're taking adequate rest days between your working days in the gym. It's really important that you're resting and recovering when needed. Your output, your expenditure, your intensity, and your efforts in the gym are going to dictate massively on your recovery. So make sure you're very, very aware of that. And also, lastly, one thing I want to touch base on is I've listed the repetitions and the working sets. You may feel or find the total amount of working sets are too high, so you may want to reduce those very slightly. Remember, doing more working sets does not necessarily equate to more muscle gain or strength. In a lot of cases, lesser working sets for optimal and maximum output within every rep and set is going to have the biggest influence on your ability to progress with building muscle tissue, maximizing progressive overload, and pushing upon your strength gains.